Oh dear, well, we have a really high quality piece of equipment here today. When I was a kid there was a firm called Steepletoe, and they made music centres. They were usually pretty basic music centres, but they could be relied upon to go for quite a while, most of them having the old BSR bouncy turntables, and I think they all had the ceramic cartridges. But, you know, for what you paid, they weren't bad. And then in the 80s there was a gradual changeover to making things in the Far East. Another Steepletoe that you may remember was a little portable record player. The thing was almost entirely made of plastic and had two little plastic speakers that plugged in. And it was very unusual in that it had 5-pin DIN plugs for the speaker plugs, and the reason for this was that the speakers contained disco lights that used to flash off and on in time with the music. And that was Steepletoe's own thing. But, as I say, by the time you got to the 80s, oh dear, what had gone wrong? Well, this is really the granddaddy of the crappophones that you see all the hipsters with nowadays. Those dreadful Crossleys and Prolectrics and rip-off Philips designs and all the other old rubbish, well, new rubbish actually. I can hardly glorify them with the term record player. I did get one once to sound quite reasonable. I don't know who made it, there was no maker's name on it, but I used long throw speakers in it of a suitably big size. It turned out it could accept 5x7 speakers rather than the 3-inch ones it had in it. So I put a couple of long throw ones of those in it, and the sound with a new transformer and capacitors was absolutely transformed. But alas, I couldn't do anything for the record player because the clearance wasn't big enough to drop the old-fashioned BSR single player in it. It wasn't high enough inside, and it wasn't right shape either. So that knackered me. So the record player still sounds atrocious. But on CD and cassette and radio playback, I have to say the sound isn't bad. Although you've only got a volume control, there's no tone control, let alone bass and treble. This thing is truly horrible. And you'll see what I mean when I switch on. That's the sound at sort of idle, if you like. Precision made, this is. One of the Far East's finest turds. Presumably found bobbing off the end of Hastings sewage outfall back in the 80s and roped in by the fishermen. There you are, you see, not unreliable, isn't it? It's just rubbish. And when you look inside, the reason for all this becomes clear. If I move the lamp over a bit, you can see there they've just inundated this whole radio board with wax and snot glue, hot glue. So you haven't got a hope in hell really of doing anything with it if anything fails. And there's a loud hum all the time in the background, which you may not be able to hear on the film. But I'm fairly sure that this cap here, which is your main filter cap for the whole power supply thing, is, oh yeah, as a matter of fact, it's hot. That's not very nice, is it? Is going fat. And don't even think of changing these rather nostalgic lights inside there, because they are a bastard to get at, I can tell you that much. You've got to disembowel the whole thing. This has mock screw heads on it, and they're all lined up the way they would have done it. But they don't actually do anything. They're part of this Mazak alloy casting, so they don't do anything, and it's all stuck in position with, yes, you've guessed it, loads of snot glue. And you can see there the volume control. If I move my massive paw out of the way, it's asking for trouble. It's so flimsy, it picks up all the dust and dirt. There is the waveband changeover switch. That's the same. The whole thing is a sort of diarrhea walnut effect. Now, I suspect it was darker when new. But look at all this crappy MDF stuff. It just comes apart in your hands. You try and screw anything into it and you can't. The tape drive, which is actually a fairly good one compared to some of the rubbish I've seen in these, is an automatic reverser from a car system, I should say. It's got the letterbox slot on the front, so it will at least play both sides of your tape and offer fast forward and rewind, which is more than most do. The one that I got to sound nice actually had a fully functional tape deck with rewind and record. Pity about the DC bias on recording, which makes everything sound like shit. Anyway, back to this thing. Loads of snot glue there. Bung a few bits of wood in here. Let's pad it out. Yeah, that'll do, won't it, in it? And why on earth people waste their money on these things? Absolutely beyond me. They've been so anxious to make a quick buck that they haven't even got the thread lock on these nuts properly. They just and you know, that's it. I'm not even going to try and repair this thing. It's simply not worth my bother. The cassette mechanism, yes, I will keep that, because it does at least seem to be, well, I won't say of high quality, but reasonable quality. And the head in it is almost totally unworn, because of course the thing has sounded like crap since birth. So guess what? Nobody's used it much. If this is the state that one that hasn't got many hours on it is in, then the others must be at the bottom of a Pepsham tip by now. That was our local rubbish tip. As for this thing, well, it's one of the Far East finest. This is, I suspect it was found floating with all the other turds in the 80s off the end of the sewage outfall at Rockall down here in Hastings. Thankfully, that is no longer made. Unfortunately, things like this continue to be made. Later on, of course, they gained CD players, didn't they, using the cheapest possible transport they could possibly get hold of. And the same with the record player. The record players, by and large, they're the sort of thing that you'd have got in a really cheap and nasty thing that, Woolies might have sold years ago, back in the 90s. They actually remind me of the lattice system used in the Amstrad and Binatone tower systems. Only the tone arm is different, and there's no way to adjust the tracking force, that is to say, how much pressure the needle puts on the record when it's playing. So if it's too high, it will damage your records, believe me, and you will notice a difference after a while. You're much better off really finding an old music centre, a proper one, because they usually have an auxiliary input on there. And so if you want to, yes, by all means, you can plug your new fancy device in and all this sort of thing, or a CD player into it. Yep, it'll work, no problem, in most cases. But as for things like this, well, I think straight down the toilet. It is, after all, diarrhea brow.